We're talking today with Max Doering of Cascade, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Max, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to start with, where and when were you born?
Born in October 1924, right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Okay, and did you then grow up in Grand Rapids?
Yep.
Okay. What did
Public school, the whole works.
Okay, and what did your family do for a living then when you were growing up?
My father was a stockbroker, worked for Paine-Webber.
Okay, so when you're about 5 years old, the big stock market crash happens. How did that affect your father?
Business was slow. We kind of had to watch our P's and Q's and be careful, but we were, I think, better off than most people.
Okay, so he managed to weather that particular storm and have regular employment of some kind. And how many kids were in the family?
Just my brother and myself.
Okay, all right. And you were certainly very young at the beginning of the Depression. By the time you got to the late 1930s, did you have a sense that things were getting any better, or were they about the same?
No, it was, the feeling all over was much better. And feeling in Grand Rapids.
Okay, and in like 1939, 40, 41, before Pearl Harbor, were you paying much attention to the news in the world, or were you just focused?
Oh yeah, we were following the world news quite closely.
Okay. And did you think that sooner or later we were going to get involved in Europe? Was that the expectation?
We had high hopes that we weren't going to get involved, but we managed to anyway. So.
Okay. How did you learn about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, that was Sunday morning, and we came home from church, and I think my dad used to always turn on one of the Chicago stations. They had pretty good music, and he turned it on, and we were absolutely flabbergasted when we heard what was happening at Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And the first thing my dad said was, "Well, boys, you're going to get involved in this sooner or later."
Okay. Now, at that point, so you were 17 at the time?
Yeah,
40, late end of 41.
17.
Okay. Now, did you consider just going off and enlisting, or were you going to wait for Uncle Sam, or?
No, I didn't really want to enlist. I just thought I'd wait for the draft, and which is what I did. And I went along with all my friends who went there within a week or two of each other. So,
okay. Now, did you receive a draft notice, or did you?
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay. But then, before you actually had to report for that, though, didn't you go and enlist?
Yeah.
Okay. So what branch of the service did you enlist in?
In the Navy.
Okay. And why did you pick the Navy?
Because I didn't want to go in the Army. It was easy.
What was wrong with the Army?
It just didn't sound so great to me.
Okay. All right. So when did you actually enter the service then?
In 1940, late winter of 42, 43 winter.
Yeah.
Right, sometime in March.
Okay. Yes, right around beginning of March of 43.
Right.
Okay. And where did you have to report to first?
Well, here to Grand Rapids. Then they sent us to Great Lakes. And so we went duly to Great Lakes and went through boot camp there.
Okay. For people who don't know, where is Great Lakes?
North of Chicago, I'd say 40 to 50 miles.
Yeah, just a little bit south of Wisconsin at that point.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Close to the border, right, pretty much on Lake Michigan.
Okay. And once you arrive at Great Lakes, what does boot camp consist of?
Well, just basic training in the Navy and a lot of regimentation and marching and drilling and that sort of thing.
Okay. The regimentation part, what kind of rules did you have to follow, or?
Well, they were trying to, of course, shape us up into thinking and acting like Navy people. So we had a commanding officer who was a athletic officer from Texas, and I guess he could probably swear more than anybody I ever heard in my whole life, which was, I suspect, part of his job is to play the super tough guy, and which he was. And so he drilled us, and we went out drilling. I don't know, quite a bit of every day, and then we did other stuff. We went to the small boat basin, and I went to learned how to tie knots and a whole bunch of other odds and ends of stuff.
Did they have much classroom stuff?
Very little.
Okay, they're not teaching you the history of the Navy or anything like that?
No.
Okay. How much emphasis was there on discipline?
A lot. It was very, very strict. We were in the barracks. Just when I went in, when they first got cots, I think 1 or 2 weeks or months ahead of me, the guys all went in the Navy, they all got a hammock. They all had to learn to sleep in a hammock. Of course, plenty of them fell out. But by the time I got there, they were done with the hammocks. I was issued one. It might even be around the house here someplace. But we had regular cots and double deck. So.
All right. And how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to life in the Navy?
Didn't particularly bother me. I wasn't used to that much discipline, but it was easy to take.
So what would happen if somebody didn't follow the rules or didn't do things the way the instructors liked it?
Oh, they'd give you some menial task of cleaning the bathroom, cleaning the urinals, that sort of thing. I goofed up once on something, and it seems to me that I had a steel wool. I can't remember what now, but just, sort of a punishment.
Okay. And how long did the boot camp last?
As far as I can remember, roughly 8 weeks.
Okay. And then at that point, have they figured out where you're going to go next or what your assignment would be?
Yeah, and so I turned right around. And they gave us a 7-day leave after boot camp. And then we went back again, and the guys went off to all their different separate schools or wherever. And I went for the hospital corpsman training at Great Lakes, which I think lasted a month, no more than 6 weeks.
Okay. Now, did you choose that, or did they just assign that to you?
Oh, kind of 50-50. They ask you what you wanted to do in the future, and I thought I wanted to be a doctor, so that's how they ended up sticking me in them.
So somewhere in there you checked off corpsman as one of the possibilities,
Yeah.
and so there you are. Okay, so this is at the same base then you were at?
Come here. Yeah.
So you're still in Great Lakes, but now, were you actually in the hospital itself, or were you in just a training
just
program?
in training.
Okay. Now, what did corpsman training consist of?
Oh, it was very simple. Bandages, wrapping different types of bandages. That was probably 50% of it. They spent a lot of time on that. But
Okay. But was it sort of geared toward first aid kind of things?
yeah, it was small. I'm going to say it was 90% first aid.
Okay. Because there are some periods where corpsmen will get a lot of sort of hospital duty training instead.
Yep.
And so but for you,
No.
it was largely bandages and treating wounds and that kind of thing. Okay. Now, while you were in Corps school, would you get time off? Could you go into Chicago or do anything?
As I remember, no, we got little, if any, time off.
And I guess if they're putting it into a month, did you have to study at night or
No.
No, it was
No.
just they just work you in the day and then
A lot of lectures.
Okay. All right. So when did you finish the corps school? It's now the summer or?
Oh, I would say, seems to me it was May or maybe early June.
Okay, because if you had about 3 months between boot camp and corps school, yeah, that'll get you into June somewhere probably. Okay.
I had a 7-day
Yeah,
leave
right.
in there.
So probably certainly not earlier than June probably then. Okay. And then once you complete the corps school, now what happens to you?
I was assigned to a Seattle Naval Hospital it was a temporary hospital, by the way. It was way up in the north end of Seattle, 165th Street, as I remember.
Okay. And how did they get you out there?
Train.
Okay. What do you remember about that train ride?
Overnights, no sleepers, just sat up. But it was whatever, 2 or 3 days took to get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you get to Seattle, and now you're up north side of Seattle. About how long did you stay there?
Oh, I think I was there for, no more than a month to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And they asked, and I didn't particularly care for it, so they asked for volunteers for the Marines. So I volunteered I've learned that was the first and last time I ever volunteered for anything.
Right.
And so they put me in the Marines, and they stuck me on the train and sent me to San Diego.
Okay. Now, before we go to this, let's back up a little bit. The time you're spending in Seattle, what kind of duties did you have at the hospital?
Just on the ward, helping on the ward. I was assigned to I think he was first or second class pharmacist mate, was in charge of all the rookies, and we just did all the common ordinary things that nobody else wanted to do,
Right. Now, were the people who were there, did you have a lot of people who had been casualties in the Pacific, or were these just guys who got sick?
We started to get them. The first batch came down from, easy girl. First batch came down from Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
They were on the Enterprise, got hit by, I don't know if that's something or a torpedo or what, but they were burn patients.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, some of them were really bad. So we had a little bit of chance to learn something about burns, not much. And this was before penicillin.
Mm-hmm.
They were using sulfa drugs in those days.
Okay. And otherwise, were there just people who'd gotten sick, or not very many patients, or?
No, it was just basically that stuff was filtering down mostly from Alaska.
Okay. Because there had been fighting on Attu when they were chasing the Japanese off of that one, and then those were Army. Those guys were Army, but then there were naval ships and things involved there too.
The Navy was quite involved.
Yeah.
Marines were not at all.
Right. Okay. But basically, you did the hospital thing. Now, if you had wanted to, do you think you would have stayed at Seattle a long time, or would they have moved you someplace else?
Have no idea how long I would have stayed.
All right. But in the meantime, you've now chosen to go to the Marines. They send you down to San Diego, just their main West Coast Training Center. And what do you do there?
Well, I went through a training course there it was about a month to 6 weeks. And once we finished that, and that was more exercise and physical than anything.
So they were getting you in shape to keep up with the Marines.
And then we didn't live with them. They had us in a separate barracks, and it was all separate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got put in a replacement unit, and were shipped overseas. And the ship I was on was a Dutch ship. Anyway, we went to New Caledonia. They dumped us off there into a receiving unit of sorts. And I spent, I don't know, a couple of weeks there.
Okay.
Month, I can't even remember.
What do you remember about the sea voyage, getting across from California to New Caledonia?
I'd say that all it was relatively calm voyage. I'd say at least half the guys got seasick, and I always remembered every ship. I felt the first day I felt queasy. Once I got over that, I was fine. And then I noticed that every time I got aboard a ship, any place, I'd feel a little bit of queasy at the very beginning, and I'd get over it, and so I never had any problems.
Okay. So you knew when it started to come on that it would be okay, and then it doesn't get any worse.
Well, I didn't have any idea if it
Yeah.
could get worse,
All
which later on it did.
Okay. Now, when you were sailing across the ocean, were you with a convoy at that point, or just?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, not at the very beginning. I think we sailed alone, and then we picked up another ship or two. Seems to me we had a destroyer running with us then for a while, and maybe no more than two of them by the time we got into New Caledonia.
Okay. And then, what was New Caledonia like?
Well, it was just another Pacific island. It was just north of Australia and north of New Zealand. We all hoped to go to New Zealand because we heard a fantastic duty there. Well, I wasn't lucky enough to go there. So, and then anyway, we went to camp there, and then they were going to ship us off to our outfits, whoever, whatever. And one day they came along and said, you know, pack your gear, you're going to the 22nd Marines. And so I went on up. I don't remember if they told me then, but anyway, the next move, they sent me up to Guadalcanal, to the receiving ship, so-called, but it was a camp. And then eventually they told me I was assigned to the 22nd Regiment, which I joined. They were up in training in Hawaii, and so I don't know, I can't remember the names of the ships or anything, but anyway, I got a board ship, and I met them someplace and went on the Marshall Island campaign.
Okay. Now, did you join them in Hawaii, or did you just get on a ship that went to the Marshalls?
No, I met them basically in the Marshall Islands.
Okay. And do you remember which island they were on at the time? Were they Kwajalein or Eniwetok, or do you not remember?
This was one of the easy ones for me. I got assigned to, I don't remember who, and they said, you know, we're going to do a landing tomorrow, what have you. And so the next day, the guys armed to the teeth, and we went down the landing nets, and we got in the Higgins boats, and we went charging in on this island, and it was only a platoon or a company strength. It wasn't a big thing. And they had told us there were a couple of large Japanese guns there. There was some emplacement, and the photo planes had gone over the. Last time was 2 weeks before we landed, and they didn't want to particularly figure out we were coming. And we went ashore, and the Japs had abandoned it and had taken their big guns. And so, of course, here comes all these guys with grenades taped on them, and oh man, you know. And I think less than a half hour after we were landed, we were all in the ocean taking a swim. We all took off our clothes. It was hot, and we all went swimming. Geez, the officers were madder than a wet hen. They were yelling at us, and nobody seemed to care much.
All right. Now, did your unit get into any fighting in the Marshalls?
That was it.
That was it.
For us.
Okay.
The Marshalls. There's a newspaper right there. There were some casualties with more Army than Marines.
Right.
I think. See, the Marines, we only had one regiment, which is 2,000-3,000 guys, where the Army had a whole division,
Right.
which was whatever Army divisions were, 10,000-15,000 guys. But anyway, we went ashore there, and the guns had been there, because there was 2 dugouts with coconut logs over the top and the whole works, and I guess they kind of controlled one of the water lanes through there.
Yeah, because you have little islets and a kind of
Little
a ring of
island-
coral around the atoll. That's the atoll. It's a bunch of little islands
Yeah.
on a coral reef.
Yeah, it was half a mile wide, maybe, and a
Mhm, yeah.
quarter mile long. And of course, once they got us out of the water, they said, "Well, geez, as soon as the tide goes out, we can get over that island. The Japs are over there." Well, the tide went out, and they went over there, and there wasn't a Jap there. There weren't even any dugouts there or anything. And that island was probably even smaller than the one we were on. And I guess the gate told me what the name was, but I don't have a slightest idea what it was.
All right. Well, that's the thing. That's something that can be looked up. You can look up the 22nd Marines. We can figure that out. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, okay. But basically, you're
Well, the 22nd was spread all over the place. Somewhere in Wetak, some in Kwajalein, and I don't know how they ever figured that all out. So,
okay. And so after that little adventure, now what did they do with you?
then we went to Guadalcanal and started training for the Guam campaign.
Okay. And about how long do you think you stayed on Guadalcanal at that point?
Oh, 3, 4, 5 months.
Yeah. Okay. And so what was life like on Guadalcanal at that point? How did you spend your time?
Well, it was pretty easy for me because we really didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to go out with the Marines and out in the jungle or anything. I went out with them a couple times just for the day, but most of the time we just stayed in camp. And so they had movies every night, and I think the whole time we were there, I think once there was what were those shows that used to come around? The Red Cross had them.
USO.
Yeah, we had one USO show. A bunch of Red Cross people came and, geez, the guys went nuts. They said, "Man, we're going to see all these girls in the show," and we couldn't even get near them. I was an enlisted man, and what few girls were there were staying over in the officer country. So that was the end of that. I learned in a big hurry.
Now, when you were on Guadalcanal, did you see much of the local population? Did they do any work around or anything like that?
The local population, there was a very scarce tribe. The people were black or awful dark colored. And I think I saw one guy, he came to our tent one day and was bargaining for a mattress cover, a mattress sack. We had big sacks there. We finally got some green ones. And so I gave him one of those, and he gave me a hand carved out, kind of a baton or a hatchet sort of thing, but it's all carved out of wood.
Right.
I think there's one here down in the basement someplace.
Okay. All right. But you didn't. But there weren't. It wasn't as if there were a whole bunch of them working around your camp or anything like that. They were just off somewhere else.
Never. It's the only one I saw the whole time we were there.
Okay.
And we were there a long time. We went after Guam. We went back there again and got training for Okinawa.
Now, what would you do just when you were off duty? I mean, I guess there were movies you could watch. Did you play sports?
Played a lot of cards,
Yeah.
a lot of poker.
Okay. And did they have problems with people getting malaria?
When I first got there, I think more than half of the guys got malaria. And if you got it real bad, you'd get surveyed back to the States. We were all done. I never got malaria. I got dengue fever, which was similar to it. I actually got that when we were up on Guam. I had to go to the hospital. I had temperature 105, but I got over it in a couple days. And I don't know if there was any special treatment. It was just hotter than blazes, so that's all I can remember.
Okay. Now, for malaria, were they giving you medications to prevent it?
Yeah, we were still eating the old Ataburn, and the guys were turning yellow. And then they brought out a synthetic, and the other disease was filariasis. We called it moo for short.
And what was that?
Well, that got into your different glands here and glands down here. And I never got it. Some of the guys got it, and they got surveyed. They got sent back to the States. But I think not only the Army and the Marines had done a lot of research on the mosquito situation, and I think by early 1944, they had figured out they had to spray all the ponds with oil and cut down on the mosquito population. And they got it under control. And after that, hardly anybody ever came down with malaria. But the guys that had it, some of them had reoccurring attacks of it, and so it was quite a disabling thing. If you had it bad, I think you could have it easy, light, or heavy.
All right. Now, while you were there, did you get much communication from home? Were people sending you letters and that sort of thing?
Yeah, my mother wrote me every day because my brother was in the Army. He was in Europe, so she was just great about that.
And was she able to send you packages or things like that, or just letters?
Yeah, no, once in a while I would get a package. She would write a letter and say she sent a package, and I think I got all of them. I think maybe one of them I didn't get. I don't know, but they put chocolate bars in and stuff like that. Well, geez, sometimes when we got those, many days ago, I had a thermometer, by the way, that I hung outside of my tent. Many days, 120 degrees, day after day. Then the wet season came, and that was absolutely miserable. Would rain every day, just pour, and humid.
So some of the stuff in the packages was not in good shape when it got to you?
True.
Okay. Now, when you finally got orders to ship out, was that kind of a relief at that point?
Well, the orders to ship out were the outfit was going into combat.
Right.
So we'd go aboard ship, and they were the troop transports, of course. And then we had the USS Missouri always went with us. And so when we landed, for example, they were with us in the Marshalls. I didn't see them there. They were on a bigger island. But in Guam, they laid right offshore where we landed, and they would fire the 16-inchers over our head. And I'm telling you, the shell craters for those things were bigger than this room, and 20, 25 feet deep.
Okay. Now, they load you up on ships. At what point do they tell you where you're going?
After you're aboard ship.
Okay.
Then they would tell you where we're going to land, and then they would have a class every day or two about tactics and on and on.
Would they show you any maps or pictures or things to try to give you some idea of what it looked like?
No, not really. I don't think I saw any maps.
All right. And then basically sort of then how did the actual landing process proceed? Was there a long bombardment first, or was it?
Oh yeah, the Navy'd get in there and they'd soften it up. They'd have some. I didn't see more than one battleship the whole time until Okinawa, and there were 3 or 4 or 5 of them offshore. But they would soften it up. They would just bombard the tar out of it, and the Navy Air Corps was coming in there, bombing and strafing, and I don't know what they were strafing, but and then the Army, of course, had their Air Corps. But on Guam, the whole operation was Marines. And after we were there a week or 2 weeks, the Army came in behind us, and maybe some other places too, but for garrison duty.
Okay. Now, the landing on Guam, was the company you're with, were they in kind of a first wave, or were you with a follow-up group?
No, well, as usual, we got screwed up and we were kind of got lost, and there were we landed in half tracks, and there were two of us, and there was one battery of Jap gun there someplace throwing shells out at us, and I'll be darned if they didn't drop one right in one of those half tracks. But it wasn't the one I was in. It was the other one that killed all the guys in it. Geez, it was a mess.
Okay. Do you know about how big the landing craft was? Did it just hold the two half tracks, or could it hold four of them, or? Because there's the LC.
No, we got off the.
Or was this after you landed?
We were on a troop ship, and then we just went down the cargo nets and got into Higgins boats. On Guam, we went in on half tracks.
Right.
But
a half track has to come in on a landing craft.
Well, it's a landing, it's a water and a landing craft. They could paddle around in the water.
Okay.
They'd pull up to the thing, and we would get on the thing, and then they would go take us ashore.
Because I guess I'm familiar with the ducks, with the amphibious trucks.
Well, that was a much bigger thing.
Okay.
The Army had those. We didn't get any
but
ducks.
you actually okay. Oh, I know they had and then they had the tracked vehicles.
Half tracks.
Did they have wheels in front?
The ones we had wheels on the front and half a track on the back, but they could paddle through the water. They were very cumbersome, but we got ashore.
Okay. Because I didn't even know we had those.
Yeah.
So you've taught me something new.
Well, not my. You would be amazed how much equipment we got that was stamped. A lot of it 1918 is from First World War. We got some French 75s. Then I joined a weapons company. We had the old French 75s for a while.
Okay. So when you're landing on Guam. So there are some Japanese shooting back at you.
Oh, yeah.
They hit the other half track and so forth. And then what happens to you once you get on shore?
Well, we went after the Japs. And the infantry moved in, and we followed along behind them, and the first division had landed on the other side of the island, over near the town of Bagania, I think it was. I'm not sure of the
that
name
is the
now
name of the town, yeah.
And we landed at a different place, but we landed the 22nd Regiment and the 4th Regiment. We landed as the 1st Brigade, and then we went ashore and went out on the Erode Peninsula, where the old Marine barracks used to be. And there were more Japs over fighting the 1st Division than us, but we had a bunch of them in front of us, and as I remember, it took better than a week before we polished that thing off.
How long did it take to link up with the 1st Division?
We never did officially, link up with them. They just fought their thing there, and we fought our thing here, and we really weren't even close that I know of.
All right. And then, was your unit taking many casualties?
I would say light to medium.
And at this point, were you doing first aid, or were you in a field hospital, or where were you?
No, I was doing first aid. I wasn't in the hospital. I was with the troops. But I think I had I'll tell you one experience I had there, which was, looking back on it, was interesting, but when this happened, it wasn't much fun. We were moving out towards the end, and one of the guys got hit, and as he went down, they screamed, yelled for Corpsman, so I went over there, and there was one of the Marines had his shoulder blown out, and it was a dry wound. There wasn't any blood involved. You could see the tendons and the muscles and the ligaments and the blood vessels and everything, but he wasn't bleeding. It wasn't a bleeding problem, but it was this big open wound, and so I put a big battle dressing on, dumped some sulfa powder in there, put a dressing on, and I wanted to give him some morphine. He wouldn't take it. He absolutely refused. He said he just didn't want it. I told him he'd probably go into shock, if he didn't take it. Well, that's okay by him. He just absolutely didn't want to take it. So I said, geez, I got to get you out of here. And there wasn't anybody around. And I yelled for stretcher bearers, and nobody heard me. So I finally said, well, I think the aid station is back a ways. So I picked him up, put him in a fireman's sling, and started carrying him back. And I don't know how I ever did it, but I did. And I got halfway back or something, and I was going across this field, and there was one tree in the middle of the field, and all of a sudden I heard this rifle fire, and there was a Jap sniper someplace. And of course it scared me, scared him, and we flopped down under that tree because it was shady. And I think the sniper was above us. I never knew. I couldn't ever figure it out. And we waited there and waited, and maybe every 10 minutes this guy would take a shot, just one shot. And I don't know what he was shooting at, because he could see stuff I couldn't see. And we were there probably at least a half hour, and nobody went by. And I finally said to him, I said, we got to get out of here. And he agreed with me, and he was starting to feel pretty bad. So I picked him up in the sling, and I thought, oh, geez, I know I'm going to get shot. And I started to carry the guy. I had him over me, and I said to him, I says, if the Jap shoots us, he's going to hit you. I don't know if he's going to hit me or not. But that guy never shot at us. And so I got him back to the aid station and turned him in there, and I don't even know what ever happened to him. And I turned around and to go back to my outfit, and I went by that field again, and here was that sniper hanging from a rope by one leg. Somebody spotted him and shot him. Mm-hmm. So I went back and joined my outfit.
All right.
So.
Yeah, that was kind of an adventure there. All right. Yeah. So you're up there with the men as they're advancing, and so you might have to go out there in the middle of the firefight and pick people up and take them back.
Yeah. But we weren't giving plasma or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And later on, the guys all got training in giving plasma on the battlefield. I never got that. Mm-hmm. So the old guys didn't get it. The newer guys had got it.
Okay. So you've now kind of seen action, and you've survived that, and
I decided I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I detested it. I was scared stiff.
So you did your job.
Well, living in a foxhole, and as I remember, I don't think it ever rained there or anything. But I remember when we finished the campaign, Jesus, we were filthy, dirty. And we found one of these shell craters where the battle wagons had thrown the 16 inchers in there. We found one full of water, and we took off our clothes, and mine had, with blood on it, and oh, Jesus. It was horrible. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we jumped in there and took a bath. Yeah. And we thought this was about the greatest thing that ever happened. And the colonel was a pretty good guy. He got showers rigged up and everything, and so we basically went on garrison duty for a week or two, and then the outfit pulled out, and they came around and asked for volunteers. Would anybody be willing to stay here for a while, because we're going to leave just a handful of guys here, and I don't know what for, but I said, well, here, I'll stay here. Better than going back to Guadalcanal. So I stayed there an extra month or so, and
Okay. And what did you do during that time?
nothing.
Now, Guam was a place where there were a fair number of Japanese still hiding in the hills someplace, and some of them were still there in the 1970s. Were you aware of any of that, or was everything quiet where you were?
It was quiet because those guys didn't come out once, once the island was secured and everything, they hid. And I know there was one that was really kind of a famous case that I think the guy was there for something like 20 years.
Mhm.
And he didn't even know the war was ended.
Right.
And they knew he was there because they'd see where he'd come out sometimes at night and steal food and stuff. But he was living in the caves and he moved around enough so they never did find him. And finally the guy turned himself in, I guess. So
Okay.
I think on almost all those islands you find one or two of those.
If they were big enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so while you were there now, Guam had been an American territory before the war, and there was a native population there. Did you see any of them while you were staying on the island?
Yeah, there was after my outfit left and I was there, I had access to a Jeep and everything, and I heard of a family down the road or someplace there in the jungle, the roads were just little two ruts. And so I got some food from the commissary and I took some food over to this family. I can't even remember their name. And it was they were pretty dirty. It was, they were miserable. They had a couple of kids and a mother and a father, and I took them food, and they were real nice to me. They were just tickle silly that somebody stopped there. And that's about all I ever.
Okay. All right. But eventually that assignment comes to an end. Did you go back to Guadalcanal after that?
Yep, went right back to the canal. Went in training and we didn't know what it was for. Everybody was guessing it was for Formosa. Well, we didn't land on Formosa. Mm-hmm. We were training for Okinawa, as we found out later, after we got aboard ship.
Okay. Now, was the fight on Iwo Jima going on while you were still on Guadalcanal?
Yep.
That's February, so you're
Yep.
reading about that and
Yep.
maybe happy you're not there, but...
Very.
Okay.
But the sad part that ended up Okinawa was 3 or 4 times worse than Iwo.
Mm-hmm.
Okinawa was just Iwo was bad enough. Mm-hmm. It was just a slaughterhouse, and the Okinawa was a bigger slaughterhouse.
Yes, was. Okay, so ultimately, the landing on Okinawa is in April of '45.
April 1st.
Yep.
Easter morning.
Okay, and so what do you remember about that day?
I remember it vividly. We landed, no problem landing. We went in I went in with the second wave. But there weren't any Japs there where we landed, so.
Had there been a bombardment ahead of time?
Oh yeah, they bombarded the tar out of the coast there. There were six divisions involved. There were 3 Marine divisions and 3 Army divisions. And we were on the northern side of the landing. Mm-hmm. And what the plan was the Marines moved in and they swung to the north. They took the north half of the island. Army moved in, swung to the south, and they went south, and the Japs were all on the south end of the island. Now, there were a few on the north end, just an odd 1 or 2 here and there.
So what were your experiences like the first few days once you landed? What were you doing?
Nothing. I mean, we thought it was, boy, this is duck soup. Mm-hmm. But the big show was at night. The kamikazes would come down, and we're still digging we stopped digging foxholes after a while. But anyway, we'd lay in the hole, and then we'd watch them, and from horizon to horizon, you saw nothing but tracers. It was just an unbelievable display. And if you watch carefully enough, you could pick out the kamikazes because they usually got them on fire. But and everything was flying every which way, but all of a sudden you'd see one a little slower, and you knew right away it was a kamikaze because it was burning.
Right.
And of course they went for the aircraft carriers. Thank goodness they didn't. Well, they hit one of them. They got the Franklin. But it was unbelievable. But after 3-4 days, we got fired up on the north end of the island. We didn't see much of that anymore. So.
Okay. And then as the campaign went on, did they switch you to join the fighting in the south, or did they move you off?
I don't know what their thinking was, but all I know is we secured the whole north end of the island. There weren't any Japs to speak of. There were a few.
Yeah.
And I did have one quite interesting experience. One day we were moving up, and there's this funny looking guy. He was a little short guy. He looked like about 5 feet tall. And as you stand on the road talking to a couple of guys, I went over and talked to him. It was Ernie Pyle. And I talked to him, and when I think back, he didn't have a helmet or anything. He just had a gung-ho hat on, and he was the only one wearing boots. He had some boots all laced up, and the next day, we sent a company over to a little island called Aishima, looking to see if there were any Japs there. And Ernie Pyle went along with them. And there were something like 2 snipers on the whole island. And when they saw Marines coming, they see this funny looking guy, little runt, dressed up far different than all the Marines. Just shot him and killed him. Mm-hmm. That's how he got killed there. So.
Yeah, and that's the. I've actually met someone else who said he thought he saw Ernie Pyle saw him get killed. And I realized that his story was different. It must have been a different correspondent, but it was on the main island and it was a mortar blast. But that's not. But
no.
But you got it right. I mean, he died on Ieshima.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So you saw that. Now, once you had cleared out the north end of the island, though, then what did your unit do? Did they just stay there?
No. Then we went to the south end.
Okay.
Then there was one other thing that happened on the north end, by the way, which again I thought was quite interesting. Is we were moving up one day along the road and everything, and a P-47 came roaring in, and the guys said, "Hey, P-47, we're all waving to the guy, and he comes down this road, and all of a sudden he cut loose with all of his guns and strafed us. And geez, of course, everybody just dove in the ditches and everything. And no more than 30 seconds behind him, 2 more thunderbolts came flying through there. By then, we were scared stiff of what was happening. And we found out later today that Japs had sneaked into the airfield down on the southern end of the island and stolen I don't know if they got more than one plane, but they got this one plane, and the Jap pilot took off. And he was up on the north end of the island to strafe us. And the 2 P-47s followed him. They shot him down because they knew what was going on. And we didn't know that. And, it took a couple of days before we got the whole story. So.
Okay, that's pretty something. Okay. All right, and then, but then after that, you go in and you join the fight on the south end.
Yep. Then we went to the south end. My division was on the right-hand side, which is on China Sea side, or I guess whatever. Army was on the left side of the island. Marines were on the right, and we got down to the main fortifications, and there we were stuck. We got down there by the 1st of May. And it was just an absolute slaughter. It was horrible until late June. So, and eventually they cracked sugar. My outfit went up on Sugarloaf, but my platoon didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God, because I wouldn't be here otherwise. And they went up there every night and they just killed it. It was just a slaughter.
Was there kind of a sort of a routine for a while when you're up there in the lines? I mean, would you attack during the day and
Oh,
stay
we
put?
never did anything at night.
Okay.
Everything was in the daytime.
And would the Japanese try to come out at night and make trouble? Or?
Oh yeah. We got these infrared guns where you could
Scopes. Yeah.
sight on a gun, and we all had supposed training for it. I looked through it at night. I couldn't see anything. So anyway, they got those, but the Japs would come after us at night. They'd infiltrate the line, and they were behind us when we got to the south end of the island. I think sometimes there were more Japs behind us than there were ahead of us, because it was all tunneled out. So it took them a good 6 weeks before they started to get in control of the thing, and then, of course, then the last couple of weeks it just collapsed. But no, at night there, I'm sure we killed more civilians than we did Japanese soldiers. The only figures I can remember is Americans lost something like 25,000 guys. The Japanese had 100,000 guys. We killed them all, captured a very few, and we killed something like 150,000 civilians.
Mm-hmm.
But see, the Japanese made the civilians come after us. So a lot of times you'd see these gals, young gals or women, walking along out there at night, and they were firing up illumination
Flares or?
No, the flares. Yeah, they tried to have the lights on almost all the time. But you'd see the women coming by, and then all of a sudden they come up near the front lines, and you leave them alone, and all of a sudden they throw a grenade at you or something. And so it didn't take very long. We had orders to shoot anything and everything that wiggled in front of us, and Jesus, they did, And it was just a slaughter. It was terrible.
Yeah. Now, at the end of it, I mean, there were Japanese survivors. Some of the military survived. A fair number of civilians were there at the end and surrendered.
Civilians they probably had more survivors.
Yeah.
The Japanese army had almost no survivors. They had been taught. It was in their blood. It's a big honor to die for the emperor. They're going to go to a special heaven or whatever. And they believed it.
Okay. Do you have a sense for what kind of casualties your own company took while you were there?
No, not really. I do, though. It was kind of sad. The oldest guy in our company, in the whole company, was a 44-year-old guy. He was one of the first guys that got killed.
Mm-hmm.
He was married. He had a gas station and a garage, a wife, and 4 kids, 4 boys. He had to get into it, and I guess he had a terrible time getting into the Marines, but they finally let him in, and Jesus. And his oldest son, I used to talk to him and everything. He was telling me about it. His oldest son was running the gas station for his wife. She and the boy were running the gas station, trying to hold that business together. And then I often wondered whatever happened to her, because then the next guy that got killed, we had a guy with us. He had joined the Marines, lied about his age, got in okay. He was 16 years old, and when things got hot and heavy, he'd had it, so he turned himself into the lieutenant and said, you got to send me back because I'm underage, and they wired back to the States and everything. And I guess they finally sent word up to get him out of there. And the night before they got word, he got killed. Next day, he got his orders to leave. So that's...
Yeah. Okay. Now, had you gotten to know a lot of the men in the unit over the course of the time that you've been with them, or had the personnel...
Yes, I knew quite a few of them, but when I first got overseas, one of the first guys I ran into was a Marine sergeant. I think he'd gotten malaria or something, but he was coming back through a repo outfit. And I was in the tent with him, and so he gave me some advice, and the one thing I remember, he said, don't get real buddy-buddy with anybody, because he says, when they get killed, he says, it's harder for you to handle that if it's a good friend. So I always remembered that, so I never try to get real close or really buddy-buddy up with any one guy, for what it's worth.
Right. All right. So you get, I mean, so you, and now I guess so did you live a lot kind of just dug into the ground while the fighting was going on? You just stayed in your hole?
Oh, yeah. One of the best places I stayed the whole time was, there was a ridge south of Naha, where the Japanese, where the civilians that lived there, buried their dead. And they were in caves. They had, on the backside of this hill, they had dug out these caves. And we were on this ridge holding, it was a kind of a holding line, and the activity was over here, and we were just kind of holding. And so we broke into those tombs, and it was just a wonderful place to stay. So they had these great big jars full of bones in there. They would stick the people in there, and the meat would rot off of them. And so they were full of bones, and we threw all the jars of bones out, we moved in. And so I got in one of those things, and a mortar hit on top of us a couple times, all to shake the ground a little bit of dust. And it was the safest place you could have been.
Right. Now, did the
But the Japs were there on both sides of us, Again, they were fighting here, and then they'd go underneath, and they come up behind us.
Now, did the Americans eventually kind of figure out to kind of go back and try to find all of the tunnel exits and find the tunnels and work their way through them?
They slowly sealed them off. We used to throw grenades in these holes, these caves, and try to close them up. And if you couldn't get them closed, they would send the tanks up, and the tanks would have they looked like a bulldozer.
Yeah.
They had a plow or whatever on the front, and they would come up and they would just seal the caves off. And then we had flamethrower guys with us, but some of those tanks had flamethrowers on. The tanks would come up with shooting the flames down, and they'd go up to these caves and they'd roast everything they could with those guns, and then they would seal them. So.
Now, did the Japanese have a lot of firepower by way of artillery or mortars or things they could use, or?
They had pretty good, because see, they had 3.5 years to fortify that island, and one of their absolutely top defensive generals laid out the plans for the whole thing, and it was a tough nut to crack. It was all the interchange underneath and everything that was going on, and they had to just plain seal it all off. The key to it was Sugarloaf Mountain, and that was the biggest nut of all. And we sent I don't know how many companies up there, and they just get annihilated. So.
But yours wasn't one of them.
Thank goodness, no.
All right. So then you kind of finally get through it, and you get to the end of June. At that point, the Japanese. Now, after the battle was officially over, were there still Japanese around making trouble?
Oh yeah, there was. They declared the island secure on June 22nd, and that day I'll never forget, because I was in the 22nd Marine Regiment. And I don't know, the night before somebody came along and said, "Hey, Doering, got some orders for you," or something. And anyway, I looked at or read the thing, and sure enough, I was way overdue for going home. And they knew it. I asked about ahead of time why I didn't get my 30-day leave when I had my 18 months up. And they said, "Well, we can't afford to send you home, you know. We need for the next campaign." And anyway, there was my orders to go home and get on such and such a ship. And so the next day I went down to the harbor and found out where the ship was. And I can't remember how I got on the thing. I got on it, and we sailed back to Guam, and there were maybe 10 passengers. And I went ashore in Guam to where our division was coming back to, and of course the tents were all set up. It was all empty. I was about the only person I even knew was there, but I was only there maybe no more than 3 days. When somebody came and says, "Here, you got orders, get on ship so-and-so down to harbor," which I did. I went down, got on the ship, and that went to San Francisco.
Okay. I'm going to pause right here because tape is just about up, so we're going to... Okay, we've gotten in your story to the point where the official battle on Okinawa was over. You were being sent home on a 30-day leave. You got into Hawaii, and then from there...
No,
you were going to Guam.
I got to Guam, then I went to San Francisco.
San Francisco, okay.
Then I got home in Grand Rapids around the 1st of August, 1945, and the 10th of August, the war ended. And I thought, geez, that's great. I don't have to go back for any more of that miserable stuff. And I had to report back to the Detroit receiving ship, which, I don't know, 1st or 2nd of September, 3rd maybe. I went down there, of course, turned myself in, and they looked at, they said, "Oh, here, we got orders for you. You got to go to Treasure Island and San Francisco, the Naval Receiving Station," which, and I went. I thought, you know, they're going to give me duty here in the States someplace. I got out there, and I was there, I think, almost a month. And one day I got noticed to go to the office or whatever. I went to the office and said, "Here, we got your orders. You're going to go back to your outfit, your old outfit." I said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "The war is over." "Well, your orders have been cut. You can't do anything about it." And I was madder than a wet hen. And so I duly got aboard ship again, and by then all of the Marines had been sent to northern China. That was the marshalling point for the Marine Corps for the Japan invasion. Well, of course, once they started moving, they all had to go there.
Yeah, I think actually we didn't land anybody in China until after the surrender. We sent Marines there in part to supervise the Japanese evacuation, and that was there. So anyway, but that's
all I know.
But that's where they were. They were sent to China.
In September, I got orders to go join my outfit, and they were in North China.
Yep.
All 6 Marine divisions were in the process of going or were already there. And so I got aboard ship, madder than a wet hen, and I think that one of the few breaks I got, the ship broke down near Pearl Harbor, and they just couldn't continue. So they went into Pearl Harbor and they dumped me off, and then I had to go back into the Navy receiving ship, and I had all Marine Corps stuff, clothes and everything, and so I went asked the commandant of that camp, and of course he said, I got guys that have been here for over 4 years. He said, how long have you been here? And I said, 1 day. So I had to go. They sent me to duty at the Naval Hospital in John Rogers Airfield. They had a naval hospital there, and I didn't do anything. The funny part of it is, then I had to get Navy clothes again, and which I did, and the war, basically the war was over, and
So how did
I
you?
had to wait my turn
Yeah.
to get to the top of the rotation to come home.
All right. How did you spend your time?
Went ashore most of the time. Well, I just automatically, you could go ashore every other day and every weekend. So I went ashore every other night.
Well, if you were at an airfield, weren't you ashore anyway?
Well, I was ashore, yeah, but it
But
was
off
just
base.
outside of Honolulu.
Okay.
We'd take the bus in.
Mm-hmm.
I was there during the riots. They had big riots. The natives had been beating up on the Navy guys, and so the Navy guys one day went down to the athletic locker and got the baseball bats and everything. And they went after the natives, and they had a real riot, and it was at the time it was pretty major.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they got to calm down. But we had to go through a native quarters to get on the bus, and I'm sure all the Navy guys weren't acting the nice as gentlemen. Anyway, so the natives were beating them up and robbing them, and so pretty soon the Navy guys would no more of that. So but anyway, I didn't do anything. I played poker.
Mm-hmm.
I won 2 cars, and one was a Model 8, and the other was a 1939 or 40 Ford. And I won it in a poker game, and so I had a car. So I used to drive it over on the other side of the island, go swimming, and load up the bunch of guys. And one other time we loaded up a whole bunch of nurses and guys, and we went over, had a big picnic. And then after 6 months, I got my orders to go home. My name got to the top of the list, so home for a discharge. I left the car with a good friend of mine. I never saw the guy again. I never got 1 cent for the car, which didn't make any difference.
Okay.
But
one miscellaneous question. Earlier, when you were talking about your time with the Marines, you talked about being with the weapons company. Now, were you still with them as a corpsman? So you just changed from the line company to the weapons company?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, at what point did you do that? Was that on Okinawa or was that earlier?
No, it was after we got home from Guam. Then they sent me to the weapons company because they didn't have any pharmacist mates. So I went up there and opened a sick bay, and then I was there for maybe a month, and they decided they needed more pharmacist mates, that I would just take care of 1 platoon. So they sent a second guy, and he was going to take care of the 2nd platoon. Then the 3rd guy finally came for the 3rd platoon, and then we never got the 4th guy for the 4th platoon till, and then we went off to Okinawa.
Okay. So you're with the weapons company when you went to Okinawa?
Yep.
Okay. Now, was that a little bit better in this? Would the weapons company guys be a little bit farther back?
Yeah. It was called Special Weapons, and what it was we had 30 caliber water-cooled machine guns. We had the 30 caliber, real lightweight. We had 37 millimeter cannons. We had 75. The old French 75 on half tracks. And
Did you have mortars? Or?
no, we didn't have any mortars at all, but we got a bunch of BAR men, Browning automatic rifle guys, and we had a couple flamethrower guys, but I never even. They weren't in my platoon.
Okay.
Anyway, it was special weapons. And as I look back, it was a good place to be because you would be backing up the infantry, and if the infantry over here had a problem, they would, tell the CO, and then he would say, well, here, I'll send you 4 water-cooled guns, we'll send you 2 50 caliber, we had 50 caliber machine guns, or we'll send you a flamethrower, we'll send you this or this or this. And so we were all over the place. And I ran into one of my guys, he was all Japs had thrown a grenade at him and went behind him, and he had about 20 pieces of shrapnel in his back. And he was madder than dickens at me. And I said, well, I was so-and-so, I was supposed to go with this guy or with that or something. But, there were 40 guys in a platoon, and they were working in pairs. I never knew where to go. So I just tried to do the best I could, and I'd set up, if we stalled up for a couple of days, I'd set up an aid station for my platoon, and I never did see all of them. And I haven't the slightest idea to this day, I haven't the slightest idea how many of them got killed. I know the first 3 guys, I knew them quite. The 3rd guy, by the way, was on Okinawa. We're going to move one day someplace by truck, and the guys were getting in this truck, and he was ahead of me. It was a big kid, nice looking. He had blonde, curly hair, of all things. He took a lot of abuse from those guys, but he was sitting there. I jumped on the truck, and I sat next to him, and I don't know, sat there for a minute or so, and I talked to him, and he didn't say a word to me. And I finally nudged him and said, hey, he was dead. I couldn't believe it. So we pulled him out of the truck, and I went over him, and one of some shrapnel shell had burst behind us. One little piece of that thing went under his helmet, right into his head here, and killed him instantly. He never knew it hit him. It was just, and the hole was, it was smaller than a rifle hole.
All right. Okay. Well, it's a good thing I asked about that then, because it sort of helps fill in a little better what's going on and why you remember what you remember and how that all played out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So now you've gotten back home. You're out of the military, 1946. Now what do you do?
Well, I want to go back to college. I had 1 semester in. GI Bill came. It was really kind of easy. I went to get back to college. I got married. I had 2 kids. I finished college. I got my first house. I got a very big mortgage. I got my first job. That's the end of me.
Okay. What kind of work did you go into?
I went to work for a pharmaceutical company, a Swiss company. They're the largest in the world to this day. Good duty. Geez, it was great. I worked for them for 7 years. But there was a promotion coming, and I didn't want to move to, it was going to be either New York or Boston, and that wasn't for me. So I quit, got a job as a stockbroker, and did only 48 years of that.
All right.
Quit when I was 80.
Okay. Now, let's see, had you, the woman you married, did you know her before you went overseas?
We were in high school.
Okay.
I was junior in high school. She was a sophomore. I used to take her out and went steady with her when I was a senior. And she wrote me some letters during the war, and I wrote her. And of course, as soon as I came home on leave, I proposed to her, which she accepted. But I said, I got to finish off the duty, and when I get home, we'll get married. And so I had to go back, and I went back duly, and then I came back, and we got married that summer.
All right. Now, to look back at the time that you spent in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what did you learn from it?
It just set me 3 years behind, well, I won't say everybody else, because there was a whole flock of us. got 3 years behind. So instead of me graduating from college when I was 21, I graduated when I was 24. I happened to get married when I was still 21. So
So for you, it didn't have any real impact on who you were or how you look at the world or anything else like that? The military experience or the just being in the war?
oh, it was just one of those things you did. It was there, you did it. Almost everybody did it.
Mm-hmm.
I had one or two friends who got a 4F
Mm-hmm.
rating, so I don't know how they ever got it, but they did. And those are guys didn't want to go, so they didn't go.
So you just went, you did your job, you came back. Was there any connection between having been a corpsman or pharmacist mate and going into a pharmaceutical job? Was there a link
Well,
there?
yeah, there was some relationship. They trained us. Well, it was 3 months of schooling right there, and I moved to New York, and I left my wife and child home, baby, and I lived in New York for 6 months. I came home, I think, once or twice, but I had to work or study in the office, and we had lectures all day long, every day. And then we went out selling the drugs for 3 months experience with one of the other salesmen. And then after that, we were assigned our territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the whole state of Michigan, other than Detroit and Ann Arbor.
All right.
And it was a great job. Geez, I would have done just fine in it, except I didn't really want to leave Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. My wife was very willing to go. She thought that'd be great. And I loved New York City. I just, it was a whole new way of life for me. Going to New York and the Broadway shows and all that stuff, man. So.
All right. Well, you seem to have come out pretty well in the end anyway, so I just thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, good luck. I hope you get something out of it.
Certainly. All right.
I'm afraid I ramble on.